1956 New Jersey.
This incredible story took place in 1956 in New York City. Young Thomas Fitzpatrick, a Korean War veteran and former paratrooper. He was sitting at a bar in Washington Heights. Under the influence of alcohol, he bet other patrons that he could get to the same bar from New Jersey in just 15 minutes. When they laughed at him, he took it as a challenge. He took a taxi to a small airfield in New Jersey where he once took flying lessons. Despite being drunk and possessing only basic piloting skills, Thomas managed to take off. Without navigation lights or radio, he navigated by the lights of Manhattan. His greatest challenge was landing on a narrow city street, lit only by streetlights and not designed for aircraft. Incredibly, he masterfully landed the plane on St. Nicholas Boulevard, just steps from the bar, astonishing the assembled crowd and the arriving police. Amazingly, the court treated him leniently, fining him only $100. However, 2 years later, in 1958, history repeated itself. At another bar, they again didn't believe him. To prove his legendary story, Fitzpatrick hijacked another plane, a Cessna 120, and performed a second perfect night landing, this time at the intersection of Amsterdam Avenue and 187th Street. The enraged judge, calling his actions drunken recklessness, sentenced him to 6 months in prison, putting an end to his incredible aerial adventures. This story occurred on January 15, 2009, and went down in aviation history as the Miracle on the Hudson. Passive flight. A U.S. Airways Airbus A320 was operating Flight 1549 from New York to Seattle. 9.5 minutes after takeoff from LaGuardia Airport, at an altitude of approximately 900 meters, the plane collided with a flock of Canada geese. The birds ingested both engines, causing a near-total loss of thrust. The cockpit was frozen silent, broken only by the alarm system's beeps. Captain Chesley Sully Sullenberger, a former military pilot with 40 years of experience, immediately assessed the situation. He took control, attempting to restart the engines, while co-pilot Jeffrey Skiles worked through the emergency procedures. Controllers suggested returning to LaGuardia or landing at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. However, after assessing their altitude and speed, Sully realized the crucial thing. They didn't have enough altitude to reach either runway. He calmly informed the controller, "We can't. We'll land on the Hudson." This was an unprecedented decision to conduct an emergency water landing in the center of a city of millions. A difficult landing. A water landing is one of the most dangerous maneuvers. Pilots had to maintain the nose of the plane at precisely the right angle. The slightest error would have resulted in a wing shear, a tumble, and disaster. Sullenberger managed to land the nearly 70-ton airliner on the relatively flat surface of the Hudson River near 48th Street in Manhattan. The impact was severe, but the fuselage remained intact. Evacuation into icy water. After coming to a stop, the plane began to slowly sink into the icy January water. The crew, maintaining absolute calm, organized a quick and orderly evacuation of 150 passengers through overwing emergency exits and inflatable slides. Ferries, boats, and rescue helicopters arrived at the landing site within minutes. All 155 people on board, including the crew, were rescued. Unusual technical and historical facts. 1. Almost not a Boeing. In the 1980s, the Reagan administration seriously considered purchasing a modernized McDonnell Douglas DC-10, but ultimately chose the Boeing 747 for its greater space and prestige. 2. A little Airbus. Although the airframe and engines are American, some avionics and systems, such as some hydraulics, were manufactured by European companies, including Airbus divisions. 3. A film collection. The media library is updated before each flight at the request of the presidential staff. Barack Obama is known to have frequently watched the series Modern Family, while George W. Bush enjoyed watching sports documentaries. 4. A secret color. The exact shade of blue in the livery, U.S. Air Force Blue, and the formula for the special paint, which better dissipates heat and partially absorbs radio waves, are state secrets. 5. Nearly impervious to hackers, communications and control systems are physically separated from the passenger entertainment network. Their core consists of closed, autonomous networks updated only from secure physical media, making a cyber attack virtually impossible. 6. Ghost plane. When the president flies short distances on AC-32, a modified Boeing 757, its call sign is Air Force One. But to distract attention, a second, identical C-32 often takes off earlier or later under the call sign Air Force Two, even though the vice president is not on board. Then Danny Fitch, the flight instructor, suggested the impossible: try to control the plane, using only the thrust of the two remaining engines. By varying the power of the left and right engines, they could attempt to control the roll and perhaps even the direction. It was a method no one had ever tried on such a large aircraft. Fitch stood behind the pilots and began shouting, "More left, now more right." It was a desperate, almost insane idea. Al Haynes, clutching the barely functioning control column, compared it to trying to steer a Mack truck balanced on its bumper. For an hour, they struggled with the out-of-control aircraft, circling wildly over Iowa. Miraculously, they managed to turn back towards Sioux City Airport, but they couldn't descend normally. The plane was flying too fast and in a spiral, constantly trying to roll onto its right wing. The cabin took on a life of its own. Senior Flight Attendant Jen Lee McGrath, a former nurse, announced the accident to passengers as calmly as possible. She and her crew instructed everyone on the emergency landing position. People cried, prayed, and wrote farewell notes. The cabin was silent, broken only by the cries of children. On the ground, Sioux City braced for disaster. Dozens of ambulances and fire trucks lined the runway. Everyone knew their chances were slim. The pilots couldn't lower the landing gear properly. Fitch found the emergency release, and the landing gear dropped under its own weight. The final circle over the runway was like a falling leaf. The plane swayed from side to side, its wing pitching almost 40 degrees. In the final seconds, Haynes miraculously managed to correct the roll, but the plane was still flying too fast and sideways. It struck the runway with its right wing and main landing gear, with a terrifying roar of metal tearing. The fuselage shattered, parts of the plane flipped over, caught fire, and skidded across the ground in a cloud of sparks and dust. When everything stopped, there was silence. Then the screams began. Rescuers rushed to the wreckage. Amazingly, the forward fuselage, containing the cockpit and part of the cabin, remained relatively intact. Of the 296 people on board, 185 survived. 111 died, most in the tail section and in the fire. But given the complete loss of control, this was considered almost a miracle. An investigation revealed a microscopic crack in the tail engine fan disc, which had developed during its production 18 years earlier.
If you watched to the end, write the word airplane, comma. Thanks for watching.